Welcome to the Sales Scholars, where we talk to academic experts about anything and everything sales related. Our goal is to bring some of the top academic research in the world of selling and deliver it here to you in practical, easy to apply methods that can improve your business. Well, welcome to this episode of the Sales Scholars. As always, I probably sound like a broken record, but I am always excited about our guests. Because they bring such unique perspectives from the world of selling. And this episode, no exception. I'm excited to welcome April Schofield, who's the senior lecturer and also the director of the Center for Professional Selling at Metropolitan State University of Denver, or I guess MSU of Denver. Is that right, April?
You got it.
Awesome. Well, we are excited to have you on the show. I know that our audience is going to be excited to hear about just your background and your experience in sales. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Craig. It's really exciting to be here.
Oh, good. No, I'm glad to have you. Well, I always like to jump right in to give our listeners a little bit of background on, each of our guests and kind of how in the world they got into the academic field. So how about you? How did you get here?
Sure. So I would describe my path into the academic field the same way as I would describe my path into sales, which was very unexpected, but definitely two unexpected things that I am very thankful for. So before teaching, I was in a sales role in professional sports. Sales was 100% not on my radar. Working in sports was always the goal. Sales was not. In fact, the idea of selling something really just terrified me. So in 2004, I finished my undergrad degree. I started interviewing with different sports teams, and the job that I was offered was a sales role. And I figured it was a great opportunity to, break into the industry. I would jump right in with the goal of eventually moving into a non-sales role. I wanted to do anything but sell, right? And so if we fast forward 7 years later, I was really enjoying working in sports sales. Once I understood B2B sales, which of course was completely opposite of what I had initially envisioned it to be, I was having fun. I enjoyed the feeling of helping businesses. I enjoyed the relationships I had with my clients. Some of them were even at my wedding, and it was a really fulfilling role that I enjoyed. And my teaching and selling career paths intersected. So MSU Denver's campus is right across the street from the arena here in Denver where our NBA and NHL teams play. So the sports franchises collaborated with a sales professor here at MSU Denver on a number of different assignments and workshops that he had created. And the department chair asked if I'd be interested in teaching in an affiliate faculty role, just one class a semester, and that was really exciting for me. It seemed like it would challenge me, it would be rewarding, and at that point, I saw it just as something kind of part time. And as I started to learn more about MSU Denver's sales program and sales education in general, I knew I wanted to get involved full time. Having worked in sales, I knew the critical role salespeople have within an organization. I knew how difficult sales could be if you didn't know what to do. And I knew that there were a lot of career opportunities for students who could sell. So it was exciting to make that move from salesperson to sales educator. And I love what I do. I'm thankful every day for those unexpected opportunities in both sales and teaching.
I love that. I can relate for sure, having been working in a organization and then take that first class when you start teaching. I don't know what your first experience was like, but I always remember my first day in the classroom thinking, is anybody like going to watch me? Do I get any coaching or anything like that? And they're like, nope, go teach.
You just jump right in, baptism by the fire hose, right?
That is so true. Now you mentioned that you had always wanted to get into the sports space. It sounded like that was kind of a certainty of yours. What was it that drew you to the sporting field?
When you're growing up, I think everybody always gives you the career advice to pursue your passion. I was always an athlete growing up. That was always something that was interested to me. So I felt like if I went into the sports industry, I would, never dread going to work. And so that was the industry that I pursued.
That's really cool. And so it was just kind of you had your eyes set on it, and then now looked at it. Now, do you still work with the local sports groups through the selling program?
We do, yes. So some of the same assignments that were designed from day one, we're still doing them. The professor who started our sales program, he was very passionate about, sales students need to sell something. We're doing them a disservice if they're not having real conversations with real people about real money. And so we were very fortunate that he had designed these assignments, and we're still working on them. Last year, we had to take a little bit of a pause. Obviously, sports and everything changed a little bit with the pandemic, but we plan to jump right back in this semester.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, look, April, I know when we had talked initially, we talked a little bit about, your focus as an educator on this idea of kind of skills based selling.
Mhm.
And I love the way you pointed out that, hey, in our program, we want to make sure that the students actually have something to sell. We believe the same thing in our program. I know a lot of programs around the country do that exact same thing. It's like, look, let's give them something to sell to real people with real money. And so maybe just give us a little bit of perspective on when you talk about skill based selling, what are some of those important skills that you've seen that really help drive selling today?
So first, I think is adapting that customer centric mindset. This is where we start in our program because people generally have preconceived notions about sales. Including me when I started. And so our role as sales professionals is not to persuade somebody to buy our product. Instead, we need to have a customer centric approach and figure out how can we help their business. Again, it all goes back to how can we add value. And so that mindset is really the foundation of everything we do. If we talk about skills, the skill that enables us to do this is asking strategic questions. If we want to drive value for our buyers, we've got to understand their pain points. We've got to be able to listen really well. We've got to be empathetic and open minded. So, in order to help it starts with asking good questions. Another behavioral skill I feel is important is an affinity with technology. The pandemic really sped up the digital transformation. I just read an article in Harvard Business Review that said we've seen 2 years of digital transformation in 2 months. So our students need to embrace tech, these new ways to engage our buyers and provide value for them. We incorporate some of these sales enablement platforms in our assignments, but we don't know the new platforms that'll be out there when students are on the job. It'll be something new and different than what we're using, but it's important to recognize that technology gives us an advantage that will ultimately help us close more sales and close those sales faster. So if we're not using technology, we always use the analogy of it's like riding a tricycle in the Tour de France, right? You
I love
can
that.
work
That's a
hard.
good analogy.
You can try as hard as you want to. You can work really hard, but you just won't be able to keep up. So we need to really be comfortable leveraging this technology.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. The because yeah, it's the same. You can be in you can be in the business, or you can be in the race, or you can do things, but the idea of you being a front runner is just it's not possible.
Right, you can't keep up.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I like how, and I want to talk a little bit about strategic questions, because I think if we lined up, a bunch of sales leaders and sales educators, and we said, hey, how important is strategic questions? Everybody would be like, oh man, so important, so important. But it's still so hard for people who are selling to lead with questions. And so when you use the word strategic questions, tell me a little bit about what you mean by that.
Sure. So you're absolutely spot on. Needs identification, such an important role in selling. We teach needs identification using Neil Rackham's SPIN model. SPIN is great. It helps us ask questions in the right order, actively listen, translate the buyer's needs into what we can do. And the first two types of SPIN questions generally aren't that complicated, right? Our situation questions, we learn who they currently partner with and why. And our problem questions, we're uncovering any current or even any potential issues that they could run into. And at that moment, when a buyer discloses an issue or a problem, it's instinctive for us to present our solution right then and there. We know we can help. We want to put a band aid on it and solve it right away. But we need to resist that urge and press on to those implication questions. There was a conference not too long ago. I was watching it. I think it happened in 2016, but Neil Rackham spoke about his latest research. And what he was saying was that top performing salespeople ask 4 times as many implication questions than the average salesperson. And along those same lines, we had a guest speaker visit one of our classes, and he described implication questions as the language of decision makers, which was perfect. These questions are the most powerful sales questions. We know that people buy when the pain of the problem is greater than the cost of that solution. And these implication questions, they're the ones that will get us there. The skilled sales reps, they ask the great implication questions. They've got to resist that urge to solve the problem the buyer just described to us. But these questions, they require things like critical thinking, industry insight, adaptability. And so to help our students prepare for this, we heavily emphasize needs identification both in class and through the assignments that we work on throughout the semester. So first, we spend a lot of time researching and outlining our questions in advance. Our questions have to be strategic. They give us the blueprint for that presentation that we're going to make. So we need to research our buyer, their industry, our own competitors, all of these things in advance, and develop some thoughtful questions. And before they sit down and meet with their buyer, we're going to do several role plays specifically targeting needs identification. This helps with that adaptability piece, because a sales conversation is never going to go exactly how you imagine it to be.
No matter how careful you lay it out. And I find that shows up a lot with students. It's like, because they're new, they're like, wait, it didn't happen exactly the way that you said it would. It's like, well, no, because they're people.
Yeah. And the more that we research and practice, the more confident and prepared they'll feel going into it.
Yeah, that's a really good perspective. The thing I liked about what you said, because in my own mind, as you're talking about implication questions, I'm thinking, again, like everybody would say, yep, you should ask those questions. Yet I find that so many people don't. And so it's the idea of, hey, how can I ensure that my team does? And as you were talking, I was thinking about this little formula of one is prepare questions in advance. It sounds like that's of great value. Practice using the questions. And then the third one, I'm curious what you think of this, but is to literally, as a sales manager, if I'm coaching my sales reps, to either ask, or if I get a chance to be there in the presentation, is to count implication questions. Like, how many did you ask?
That's a good one, because again, that research goes back to asking 4 times as many implication questions. So that tells us there's at least 4 in
I
there,
was going to
right?
say, I'll start with 4. And just recently, I was watching a cold call video with one of my clients that I work with, and we were doing these cold call videos for training purposes. But this salesperson was calling actual people, and we were just recording him during an hour of cold call work. And he got this one particular prospect on the phone, decision maker, and they started sharing some information about their company and some openness to what my particular client was selling. But the thing that I noticed is that the salesperson failed to ask many open-ended questions, and was doing a little bit of what you described earlier, which is, as soon as we hear something, we want to solve it. And so what I'm wondering is if there was any particular like tip that you would give to a sales leader to say, here's kind of the one thing that could really help your team be reminded of asking those key implication questions, what might you tell them?
Well, I love it. I'm writing down this assignment idea as we're talking, is, giving them a goal of how many implication questions to ask. I love that idea. And I think too, for our students, we really walk them through researching that exact industry. What are some examples of problems and implications that other businesses are running into? Because the questions too, we can't think of them as just a checklist or as one size fits all. I ask these questions, I can check them off the list and move down to the next one. So really researching that particular company and that industry, and thinking of what they might be going through and asking questions specific for that. But I love the idea of almost giving a goal of, okay, at least get to this many implication questions before we move on to the next one.
Yeah, we teach spin as well in our program, and so, and I think I've always loved about it is it's such a good framework for questions.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily think it's a complete selling process. That's my own opinion. Hopefully Neil Rackham doesn't listen. It's great, and it's such a good framework for questions to get to the information that you're trying to understand before you can even solve a problem. But yeah, the idea of, hey, if there was a number, what is it? Or what are some of the examples of the implication questions? Sounds like that could be helpful to practitioners to say, hey, if I want to make sure we're doing this, then we have a way to kind of check it. I love that you're writing down something to do with an assignment. I do the same thing when I do these shows and I listen to people talk about some of the things they're doing. I'm like, oh wait, that gives me an idea, which is always helpful to take into the classroom.
It seems like it always when you get 2 sales educators talking shop, it always seems to all these ideas start to come out. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. So I don't any other particular, like when you think about that term behavioral skills, because I think that creates such a distinction for the things people are doing. Any particular behavioral skills on top of that we didn't talk about that you think, hey, these are really important for sellers today?
Really, I think the mindset is really the foundation of it, and that kind of from there, we have a phrase, and I don't know if where this came from. I'm sure we stole it from somewhere. The WIFM, right? What's in it for me? So we always have to answer that question for the customer in every interaction that we're having with them. Why is it beneficial for them? Why would it be beneficial for them to sit down with us and answer some questions? Why would it be beneficial for them? So I think just that customer centric mindset of always thinking, how can we help? How can we add value for them is really the foundation for everything that we do in our sales process.
Yeah, that's really good. That reminds me of another client. They made that a couple of salespeople were talking one day about how I just can't get clients on the phone. It's really hard to get clients, and I think in this environment, both research will tell you and just experience that, hey, it's harder to get decision makers right now. But they were talking about how they're having trouble getting them on the phone, and so they were trying to come up with, I would call it like semi questionable tactics to get them on the phone. And I remember interrupting the conversation, said, hey, listen, if your prospects don't want to talk to you right now, then you don't have any idea of the value that you can bring to them. I thought, look, you got to figure out the value that you bring. If they don't want to talk to you, it's because you have no value. And so
Right.
try to figure that out, work on it, articulate it if it's something that has to evolve in the midst of kind of what's happening and the changes out there in the marketplace. Well, then evolve. I'm like, look, if you have to come up with sneaky ways to get a prospect to talk to you, I think you're in trouble.
Yeah, it says something about your value too, right?
Yeah, yeah, you have no idea what it is. So
Yeah.
now the behavioral skills, I think those are so helpful to talk about. I know one of the other things that you mentioned this even as we were talking about questions, but was this idea of the importance of needs identification. Like that gets right at the heart of good selling. So what are some of the obstacles you've seen in sellers? Because you've seen lots of students and in your own experience selling. What are some of the obstacles you see sellers face in effectively identifying needs?
Um, I think if we can get to those implication questions again, those are the big ones. Those are the language of decision makers, but not just approaching them as one size fits all. Right. So doing our research in advance to really understand, okay, how might I be able to help this buyer? What are some things going on in the industry that might be affecting them? And then after we're asking questions, right? Like you said, this is not a complete sales model. It doesn't stop. We're asking the questions for a reason, right? It doesn't matter if we ask great questions if we're not doing something with them later on. So, really connecting the dots and taking what you learned from those questions and communicating that value. So connecting the dots, they gave you a blueprint for what they need. So really communicating how we can help address those issues that they just identified to us.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's funny. I like how you mentioned that, they give you the blueprint. Well, I use the phrase oftentimes with my students that they give you the answers to the test. You don't have to spend a whole lot of time studying for the exam with the buyer if you will ask the right questions and just listen. But yeah, it can be a challenge. I think for new people in particular, it's a little bit more of a challenge only because their mindset often is how can I sell something,
Mhm.
versus once you've done it for a little while, you get the mindset of how can I help. And that seems to be such a distinction. Have you seen any particular maybe best practices from people who you felt like, man, they're really good at getting to the needs identification with potential prospects?
Well, I think what you said too is the key word there is help. So thinking of again, not just how can I sell them something, how can I help them with something? Nobody wants to be sold to. But if we can figure out a way that we can help, it's not only more effective, but it's also more fulfilling, right? To know that you're, wearing their uniform, playing for their team, and really helping them rather than selling them something.
Yeah, I like it. That's a really good word, fulfilling. And it sounds like as I've listened to you just in the beginning of our show, as you were describing your past sales experience and how what you I love how you said it the way so many of us did is I got into sales temporarily till I can go get a job in some other part of the business, just to get in the door. And you were like, what you found was that it was very fulfilling, that you really enjoyed helping people.
Mhm.
And so, it's having that, I think, at the heart of how you're approaching prospects and what you're doing sounds like that's something that really people could focus on these days.
Oh yeah, and another word we use quite often in our program is meaningful. So another role that we really play is helping students find careers, right? Helping them connect with the marketplace and understanding what do they want to do after graduation. And our focus is meaningful careers. So find something that you enjoy doing that is fulfilling to you. It's a grind, right? 40 plus hours a week. So we want to make sure that it's something that's fulfilling and that means something to you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. Well, look, I know that when you make a transition out of career and into academia, it can be uh, a bumpy ride. When you look back on your career selling, what any particular lessons you feel like that you learned like that stand out as, man, they've really been able to help me teach selling today because I learned this when I was regularly selling.
Okay, so a little nugget of advice that would help ease the transition from.
Yeah, or just something that you reflect that you learned that is like one of those just lessons that really burned into your mind as you made your transition out and now really informs kind of how you do what you do with students.
I think nothing will ever go as you plan it. You can have the best intentions and plan as much as you want, which is all very, very helpful. But 9 times out of a 10, something's going to be said or done that's not going to be how you initially envisioned it. So I think just being able to roll with it. And if your goal is in the right place, again, with helping and learning, you'll be okay. Understand, I think sometimes we're intimidated, but that we're talking to this buyer. But understand that you're talking to another person. It's probably not going to go exactly how you envision it, but if you're prepared and your goal is in the right place, you'll be okay.
Yeah, that's really good. And I feel like sales teaches you that adaptability like exponentially as maybe compared to some other fields. I know when I think about the variety of buyers I had to deal with over the years and the crazy number of situations that I had been in that I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in big trouble.
Hmm.
I can remember doing a sales presentation of a product one time, and right as we assembled the product prior to the buyers coming in, the product didn't assemble correctly. It had been made, something got left out of it, and so the product basically that I was looking at, that a team of buyers was coming in to take a look at in 15 minutes, was awful. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to?
Of course. And every great salesperson has a story, like a panic moment story, right? And I love to hear those stories when salespeople come into my classes and share with students and everybody can think of that exact example right off the top of their head when something did not go as planned and how you kind of had to adapt on the spot. So those are the best.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what teaches or that's something that you learn in selling over time because you get into so many of those situations. Yeah, that's great. Now, I did read in your bio. I told you I might ask you about this, but it talked about you being one of the top sales professionals in the MBA, which is a really cool recognition. How did that all come about?
So you did your LinkedIn research. I'm very impressed. So my role was group ticket sales for the Denver Nuggets. And one of the groups that I was challenged with bringing to games was cheerleading and dance groups. And I thought, well, there goes my goal. This is a group that probably has zero interest in coming to a game. And I was exactly right. They weren't interested in coming. A lot of them probably couldn't even tell you, one player on the roster. And so really what it boiled down to was understanding how we could provide value for them, which is no different than anyone you're selling to, right? My first strategy was discounting the tickets, right? I thought in my head, if we could give them, a $5 ticket to a Tuesday night game against a opponent that wasn't that exciting, they would just come in droves. And I was completely wrong, right? Even at $5 a ticket, they did not see the value there. So I really had to sit down with them individually and learn what was important. Obviously, all of the game night events that we planned for them were customized a little bit different, but one successful program was we would bring the dancers to the arena during the afternoon. Say they would come down at noon, and we would have them work with the professional dance team that we had. So they might not find value necessarily in watching the team play, but they did find value in something that we had, which was a team of professional dancers and choreographers. So we would maybe have them sit down with this team, learn more about what it's like to audition, maybe learn a professional routine from them, and they would perform that routine at halftime. So now they see the value. Now they want to come to the games and buy tickets. And now it's not just the dancers who want to buy tickets and come to the games, it's parents and grandparents who want to come and watch this performance. So again, it just boils down to sitting down with them, understanding what's important to their businesses, and finding out how I can help and provide value.
Yeah, God, what a great level of insight and a great lesson that must have been just overall in terms of, well, how do you find value for somebody for something that the initial offering, they may not perceive as valuable?
Right. And a realization too was, if they've got the motivation to come to a game, if they're interested, and they've got the money to do so, they can hop on the internet and buy tickets, right? They don't need me. So my challenge was finding folks who again, like you said, might not initially see that value proposition there, and understanding how we can help.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love it. I also love the unintended benefit, maybe that hey, if the kids come, then the parents and the grandparents are going to follow. And what a great way to create lots of value for a number of people, and I'm sure for the organization, it was a big win.
Oh yeah. And I mean, for them, it was the experience of a lifetime too, and how fulfilling that was to see them, have a really fun time at the game.
Yeah, so I'm a father of two boys, so the whole dance thing is kind of a bit foreign to me, but I've seen it play out in our community, and man, is it something that people are really interested in. So I can only imagine once you connect it with that professional sport opportunity and access to people who are at the top of that particular discipline, it must have been, a fantastic experience for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. Hmm.
So, well, April, look, I really appreciate you being on the show. I really appreciate what you shared. I think when we hear from practitioners who then are now on the academic side, it's always so helpful because you can translate it into practical ways that can impact somebody's business. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Craig, thank you so much for this opportunity and hosting the podcast. It's really been enjoyable to listen to the guests that you've had, and I've learned so much along the way.